You know, I want to talk about the big buzz. I mean, everybody's talking about Candace Owens and Israel, and we have a perspective on this that I'm going to be getting into a little bit more because I got some inside information on what's really going on. But you know that stress, you know what happens with the stress? It reduces, I guess it's cortisol or something. But I really think being joyful and being happy is a medicine, the Bible says. But I'll tell you what really gets me crazy. I have spent times, my whole history, going to the doctors when I'd have like the flu symptoms or this or that. And it always comes out to the same thing. It's like they call it a Z-Pack or something like that. And it's like, I actually got to the point where I was using, during COVID, I found this out. I used to use my phone, and I would talk to the doctor there, right? And they would tell me, prescribe to me exactly what I need. I thought, this is so much easier. Why do I want to drive down there, sit around a bunch of sick people in a waiting room? Then my staff told me, have you heard about the wellness company, where you literally get all the information you need to do the analysis of what, let's say, for instance, you've got strep throat or pneumonia, urinary tract infection, all that stuff. It's what they're going to prescribe is right here in a little kit. So you can get the kit. Chelsea, you're the one that turned me on to this. What's the deal here?
Yeah, so you go to lancewallnau.com/medical. You can find that kit. It's right there on the website. And it's just a great thing to have on hand and be prepared for, because I like to call it sugar and stress season. When you go to your family's house for Thanksgiving and you're eating all the sugar, and then you mysteriously get the flu and you're feeling sick, and then everybody's sick. And having this kit on hand is a great way, in my opinion, to avoid having to sit for hours at urgent care waiting for them to tell you have the flu or something else you might know. And so you work with a doctor, they give you a prescription, they answer all your questions, they're very helpful. So it's a great way to be prepared, have it on hand. You already know you're going to eat a whole pumpkin pie this year and not feel great later.
Yeah, but you know what I love about it is it's not a first aid kit. That everybody has. All my hunter friends have that. It's a mini urgent care kit. Mm-hmm. Everything you're going to need, ivermectin or whatever, they got it right there. You got it at home. I'm doing it. Annabelle and I are doing it. I only take time to share these things because I think they'll help you, okay? LanceWallnau.com/medical. Use that code Lance and get your 10% tithe back, all right? And now strap yourself in for the great debate. And for all the Jew haters out there, we're going to talk to Dinesh D'Souza. We'll be right into that program. Watch this. There's a very important principle that's taking place right now in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's martyrdom and assassination. I've got the Bible right here to share this with you. It's in Acts chapter 20, and it says in verse, let's just say back up to 28. Paul is about to leave a group of leaders. And when a leader departs, when a leader removes themselves, when a leader dies, the movement, the coalition that they were putting together will experience two types of attacks. This is like a spiritual principle, which I want you all to observe. Paul says in verse 27, I did not shrink when I was with you from declaring to you the whole purpose of God. Be on guard for yourselves and for all the flock, among which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers to shepherd the church of God, which he purchased with his own blood. This is his church. He bought it with his own blood, and you're overseers stewarding a responsibility. For I know that after my departure, after I exit, savage wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. And from among your own selves men will arise, speaking perverse things, to draw away the disciples after them. Therefore be on the alert. And remember that for 3 years, day and night and day, I didn't cease to admonish you with tears. And now I'm commending you to God and to the word of his grace. So let me say this. If you look at our movement and the role that Charlie Kirk had, he was the only Christian social conservative that had a biblical worldview grounded in a walk with Jesus that was conscientious to his fingertips, that could hold Matt Gaetz and Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Marjorie Taylor Greene in their America First anti-Israel position and still reach out to the 40% of the people that vote for Donald Trump who actually stand with a biblical worldview regarding God's covenant purposes for that land and the relationship of the United States as a great Gentile nation to that covenant agenda God has for the restoration of Israel and the ultimate gathering of all nations to Israel to annihilate it. And our concern is that without Charlie Kirk there, wolves come in from the outside in, starting to devour the cohesion of the MAGA base with Israel and the Jew as a target. And then from amongst his own circle of peers and friends and folks that would be on his stage with him, Charlie would have been there to push back, to recontextualize how America first does not mean we have to be anti-God or anti-Israel, and what our response should be in sympathy to God's purposes for Israel, so that we are never in a position where we are hurting the struggle of those 6 million people to survive in the Middle East. My point is, Charlie would have been the voice of coalition building. He knew how to bring the tent together. He made a place for David Rubin, who's homosexual, to feel welcome in the conservative camp. That's coalition building. And there are Christians that were upset, and they take him on, and he handled it. He handled it, and we got tape of him, how he responds. What would you have me do? Tell people they're not part of our movement because I don't agree with their views on sexuality, or create a coalition big enough so that what we have in common is important enough for us to work together against the evil. Charlie Kirk is not there to take the shark, Candace Owens, and back her up. My understanding is Turning Point's trying to put a gag on her because she's capitalizing little demon talking to her, and now it's got millions of people in the MAGA base under 30 gnawing away, hating them Jews. Oh, those Bibi Netanyahu and the Jews. And she's got an anti-Semitic spirit talking through her. And we're probably going to have to deal with that spirit and push that spirit back. Because the surest way to destroy America is for Charlie Kirk's voice to be removed and the wolves come in and the speakers divide up the group into followings following them. And my God, we got Christians that are confused. What about Israel? Well, I don't understand about Israel. All right. Well, we're going to have to dedicate some time to this whole subject of God's end time purposes and why Gaza's in the Middle East. And my friends that are on TV and on the podcast world that say we're moving on to bigger things, that's a sideshow. It is never a sideshow. It's the only show, and all the nations, China, Russia, all the countries are going to come around that show. And that's when Jesus comes back, not to Poughkeepsie, New York, but to the Mount of Olives, where his feet come down, according to Zechariah chapter 13, and land on that real estate. Why is he going to the Middle East? Why is Jesus returning? This same Jesus that you see ascending shall descend in like manner, the angel said as he went up. Well, because Jesus is coming back to Israel, to Jerusalem, where the nations are gathered together. So you want to know why America isn't in any prophetic description? I pray to God it isn't because America has some knucklehead decisions made, and its young, under 30 crowd already is anti-Semitic. They've been poisoned, and they're the future leaders and voters of the MAGA movement. No, we're in a more dangerous place than we know, and the church is us, the populist movement, the lesser voices. There's the major and the minor prophets. The minor prophets among us, like us, nevertheless have a voice, and God is about to speak, because the 30% of that Republican Party, I said, 30 to 40, doesn't agree with the anti-Semitic narrative, because we have enough fear of God to know that God's covenants with Israel don't conflict with God's blessing on America, and never will. Pray to God we get leaders to get their heads straight. Talking about the third great awakening, talking about, the fourth turning, the crucible, talking about Judeo-Christian America, it doesn't matter if you talk about all that and you're illiterate on eschatology and the inevitable turning of all nations against Israel. If you're on the wrong side of eschatology, it affects all your future thinking regarding what decisions you make. You don't have to be anti-Semitic. You don't have to be anti-Jew. You don't have to be anti-Israel. in order to be America first. That's the price we pay for not having Charlie Kirk. He could push back and hold all the lions on their chairs in the proper place because he had the under 30 audience and access in the future to a presidential candidacy. But we don't have him now, and I fear that that's going to be a price we pay. Dinesh D'Souza says Tucker Carlson is driving a wedge. Let's listen to video cut 6.
It was trending on Twitter this morning because of a post I did on Tucker Carlson. He's driving a wedge right in the middle of MAGA, and he's doing it more than anybody else. But Tucker has this kind of, he's got this aw shucks, this pink cheeks, this kind of all-American manner. And here I begin to realize that if Sharia comes to America, it's not going to look like Osama bin Laden. It's going to look like Mamdani. It's going to look like Tucker. It's going to be advanced by people born in America who don't have much of an American accent, Mamdani. People who are pretty suave, people who know how to make social media videos, Mamdani. Or people on our own side. I mean, remember the scene in The Godfather where the Godfather goes, when the betrayal comes, it's going to be someone we really trust. That's where we are, guys. That's the truth of the matter.
So the Israel attack, the attack on Israel, I only got 3 minutes left in this segment. That I guess we could play JD Vance with it, but I don't think that's going to be helpful right now. The issue is, so what's going on in Gaza and the peace? Somehow Israel has been painted as the criminal. I don't know if Canada was to attack the United States and kill 50,000 people in New York and take 2,000 as live captives and have half of them die in their custody, I doubt the United States would be blamed for going after Canada and having 50,000 or 60,000 killed because they are using the hostages as a shield. And we're trying to work around that to avoid killing hostages, but where there's civilian casualties. You wouldn't see the same one-sided critique of the United States if 50,000 Americans were killed. But that's by ratio the number of Israeli Jews that were killed and captive because they're a smaller country than us. So you kill 2,000 or 1,000 or 1,500 Jews among 6 million, there's your ratio. Factor it out. But somehow they're the enemy. Somehow they're the oppressors. Dinesh, let's hit here. Dinesh is on a roll here. I don't have enough time to get everything, but play cut 20.
Are you subjecting Israel and the Jews to a different set of standards that you apply to everybody else? If so, your motives should be in question. So for example, it is widely accepted that after Pearl Harbor, the attack on the United States by Japan, the United States had every right to go to war with Japan. The dispute may be over should we have dropped 2 atomic bombs or should there have been a land invasion. But in either case, we're talking about massive destruction, massive amounts of casualties, utterly disproportionate to the original attacks. And yet, to my knowledge, there is no dispute in America or anywhere else for that matter that the retaliation is utterly legitimate in the wake of who attacked first. And yet, the same people who would concede that when you talk to them about October 7th, they're suddenly, oh no, Israel, no. Israel has to measure the amount of casualties by the number of casualties that occurred on October 7th. And notice that Israel has killed more people in Gaza than were killed on October 7th. So suddenly you realize that Israel and the Jews, and only the Jews, are being held to a standard that is not applied to anybody else.
And so, I can't play for you the final clip because I only got 22 seconds. But I have another clip I wanted to play. What he says is that what happened on October 7th, somehow the real villain is Israel and the victim is Hamas. So the inversion of blame is actually part of the left's strategy to project the oppressor-oppressed narrative, which is a demonic inversion. Well, look, that's all the time I've got right now. What's the optimistic point here, Lance? We're still in the loose, and the cement isn't hardened yet. We still have time. We're going to have to end this segment right here. I want to bring in Gabe Poirot. this segment here about a young man that just got kicked off a Christian campus in Texas for praying for people. And he's got some insight on the election in Virginia that'll be eye-popping. We'll be right back. I wanted to take a minute to talk about one of my great heroes of the faith, which is Mike Lindell. What's really cool about Mike is it's not just the pillow. It's the fact that the guy makes really cool products. For instance, I start my day off with my coffee. I had a cup of coffee the other day here in the office, and I said, no, I want that. It wasn't like Starbucks. It tastes better. And it was Mike's coffee. I said, what is it? They go, Mike Lindell's coffee. I said, my gosh, get a bunch of my coffees. Now, the best way to start the day is you put on these slippers, right? And have your My Coffee. If you've not worked with these slippers yet, I'm not kidding you. There's a special kind of design that Mike has put into these with 4 layers of cushion with a solid sole and a fur interior. I call it my sip and slip strategy. I start my day off by slipping on my slippers and having a sip of Mike's coffee. But you know what else I'm curious about now? Because I've got to check out the 2.0 pillow. The 2.0 pillow actually is designed so that it distributes the heat of your own head, your face. You know, you're lying there, and it makes it so the pillow's always cool. Now, I like that because I wake up in the middle of the night and have to flip over my pillow because it gets hot. Mike's solved that problem. I want you to go to mypillow.com, promo code Lance, because you can get a discount that I've set up for the pillows, for the coffee, and for the slippers. And do it today. You'll be happy. Welcome back to the Lance Wallnau Show. Hey, listen, I've got a YouTuber, evangelist, author, voice to millions worldwide, Gabe Perreault. I've known him since he was a young man, and he's still a young man. But he's one of those like Ben Bergquam, going out to the front lines and doing and going right where the action is. And I was talking to him recently. I said, you know, this is so interesting, Gabe. Let's get you on the show. So we're going to talk about persecution of Christians on campuses and how they're shutting down. They don't want us around, and some interesting insights into this Winsome's battle up there in Virginia, and some facts about this controversial election that's happening. But Spanberger's work as a substitute teacher at an Islamic school. All right, Gabe, come on in and tell everybody what you're telling me. I don't know where to start with. You want to start with the Republican battle up there in Virginia, or you want to talk about your recent adventures here in Texas?
Yeah, well, I did just get kicked off of the Texas Christian University's campus because I was praying for students, and I was reported as harassing them. So we'll talk about that. But first, we need to cover this Virginia governor race, which includes, of course, the attorney general, who you'd think would be, you know, protecting his own citizens. Instead, he's texting about how many bullets it will take to kill his political enemy and his children. And he even texted about imagining the wife of his enemy holding her dead children in her arms as he pisses on his grave. So there's that too.
And there's not a single Democrat that has, by the way, renounced him. Not one.
No.
I mean, you know, think about that. Think about that for a second. That if he was 8 points behind, they'd be denouncing him purely because he might not be electable. But he's actually electable and saying that. So what does it tell you about the state of the union in Virginia? This is Virginia, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, every citizen of Virginia really needs to wake up, because if they don't speak up this November, well, I would encourage them to vote now. But if they don't take a stand, they're actually going to tolerate everything that Spanberger has tolerated. And you see, if it's one person that has been under her, it's just a coincidence, right? Until it becomes a pattern. And I started just doing some research just into her history, and come to find out in 2002 and 2003, she of course taught at the Islamic school located in Northern Virginia, the Islamic Saudi Academy, of which actually taught Sharia law and had a dual mandate to teach both American politics and then teach about how they can implement Sharia law into their spheres of influence. Was it a coincidence that Spanberger just so happened to be a substitute teacher there? Was it a coincidence that actually one of the students, Ahmad Omar Abu Ali, was born in 1981. He was raised in Falls Church, Virginia. He then became a valedictorian of this Islamic Saudi Academy high school in nearby Alexandria, Northern Virginia. And sure enough, in 2005, he was convicted of plotting with Al Qaeda about how to assassinate President Bush. And so,
And people don't realize this, but CARE, which is the Islamic Front for the Muslim Brotherhood that gets funded in the United States. General Jerry Boykin, friends of mine, have had to have security because they were on hit lists for Islamic radicals to hit in Virginia. Now, you guys have video cut 12 in the back? Hope they're not snoozing while you and I are working here. Play video cut 12 real quick. I haven't seen this yet, but I recall this segment I think would be important. Play it.
What is Abigail Spanberger hiding? Spanberger doesn't want us to know that she taught at an Islamic school nicknamed Terror High, a terrorist breeding ground. One graduate plotted to assassinate President Bush. Another was arrested for trying to bring a butcher knife on an airplane. So dangerous, even Chuck Schumer called for the school to be shut down. But Abigail Spanberger cashed her paychecks like nothing was wrong. Congressional Leadership Fund is responsible for the content of this advertising.
So that's what you're talking about, Gabe. And here's the theory that I've been told from the insiders in Washington. What they're saying is there's so much government money. Remember, $2 trillion is what we're overspending, but there's trillions that are even below that. And the wealthiest counties in the United States are the 5 counties surrounding Washington. And it reaches into Maryland and Virginia. So Virginia is there's such addicts on government payrolls. 90% are Democrats in the Washington, D.C. institutions, that the reality is they have no morality. They're interested in the money, and they want to. And so the election battle we have with Winsome and Sears, and as I'm talking to my Washington people, is that the majority of the payroll it's almost like I'm going to cover later today, the Soros and various other organization funding of the No Kings. So basically, we've got $79 million worth of protests going on, funding $79 million, spread around the money. You'll get a bunch of your activists to go, get a group of 20 for donuts and coffee to show up. This is evidence that the money and the power is all the Democrats care about. When you could talk about peeing on a grave and watching a widow grieve and watching a man and his kid get killed, and you still get elected. That's depravity in the culture. So there should not be a single sensible conservative in Virginia that doesn't show up and try to at least block Al Qaeda from getting into the cockpit of electoral politics in Virginia. And is there any explanation you've got for why there's even a close race going on?
Yeah, it really is. Virginia are just a bunch of addicts addicted to money and power, and they never want to let go of the grip they have of the federal government. In fact, they have the federal government in their hands. And as President Trump seeks to take back that government into the hands of the everyday American who deserves to actually be over the ones we elect. Instead, Virginians, especially Northern Virginia, are losing their mind. They also want to allow boys in women's restrooms. And again, Spanberger is the candidate of tolerance. What else will she tolerate? She's tolerated Sharia law in her high school. She's tolerated an attorney general who threatens to kill his enemies. She's tolerated an attorney general who also was driving recklessly 40 miles per hour over the speed limit and got a slap on the wrist with community service to his own political organization, right? And so what is she going to tolerate next? Could it just be she's going to tolerate, just like New York City with the Sharia law, with the certain MCPs, the Muslim Community Patrols, who are now going store to store to ensure that there's no pork or certain standards that are not being lifted up to? And again, if we want to look into a mirror, let's just look into Britain. Let's just look into what happened to Europe when they tolerated every doctrine of Sharia law. Just look what happened.
Well, you're bringing up an interesting point, and that is that there's some kind of a strange thing. And I have a spiritual paradigm for this. That's why I got my Bible up here. I do the newspaper in one hand and the Bible in another, and I find that they both integrate pretty well. I think that there's almost territorial spirituality. When you look at New York City allowing Mondami, when you look at Virginia, and if it wasn't for Trump nationally being inserted in to Babylon in Washington, D.C. And boy, you put a guy like Trump there, and he shut down the crime. He's remodeling the White House. He's owning his territory. But the territorial map of spiritual darkness makes me think, and I haven't thought about it till you said it, that if this New York Muslim mayor, socialist, gets in, that builds a stronghold there, and it reaches all the way down to the depravity of Virginia, creating a corridor of darkness where our chief financial centers are on Wall Street and where power is in Washington and in electoral offices in the states. Is that an exaggeration to see that, actually, as a Christian, looking at it like a cloud for almost like a weather front that is operating in the Northeast?
It's not an exaggeration, especially when you look at her lieutenant governor who is on her ballot, who has some pretty interesting ties to Sharia law as well. Of course, she is a regular attendee of certain mosques, and she, identifies as a Muslim. And of course, the claim will be that this is somehow right-wing extremists who are just Islamophobic are making things up about Spamberger. However, it's clear that the evidence of her history points to some very interesting connections that any rational person would come to, and it's something we need to talk about. Again, it's if it was just one thing at a certain time, then it's just a coincidence, right? But it really is clear she is a patterned person of tolerance for whatever amount of evil can further her agenda. And even though she was cleared by the CIA after, as if that somehow clears her reputation,
well,
that's been her case.
Cleared by the Brennan remnants of the CIA, who was once a member of the Communist Party.
Because that makes us feel so much better about her case. You know what I mean?
I feel so much more assured. But I don't understand. Youngkin got elected as a conservative. And he beat Terry McAuliffe, right? And he was the Clinton, foundation director, and he was a shoo-in, but he got in crossfire with moms and dads and the school choice thing, and saying the government will control the education of your kids. Is what happened to that coalition that put him in? What are they? I'm asking you, like you're the great Santini, who's going to have all the answers here. But there is a conservative base that put him in office. So what's is it a campaign issue, or is it a money issue, or is it just that the left is more energized than conservatives in Virginia?
That's the thing. I truly believe millions of Virginians viewed the 2024 election as if that was enough and that they could just stay back. And we do see a pattern of this. Those who win in the prior election always, just stay back in the couch for the next election. And so the parents really do need to stand up. They need to recognize, the schools in Nova are still allowing boys in their girls' restrooms. In fact, there was a certain trans student who visited the girls' locker room at one school, assaulted a girl, then was transferred to another school, assaulted a girl, and was transferred to another school and assaulted a girl. At some point, you recognize the pattern here. At some point, maybe you would speak up for your children. I don't know. And so that is the case that Winsome Earl Sears is making. And I will say I was actually on a call with her team last night, and I can say she is a bold leader, and I believe she is ready for this moment, and she is calling out to the parents right now. And again, that we need every person with any rationality to vote in Virginia.
Well, listen, folks, my audience is kind of like all over the United States, but if you've got friends, you got somebody in Virginia, this is really an alarm. What we're looking at happening with the radical left in New York and now in Virginia is scary, because it's as though morality and the very foundations of American Republican ideology is being assaulted by radicals that want to gain more power. You've got to contact them. Gabe, how do people follow you and keep in touch with you?
Yeah, they can just visit youtube.com/Gabe Perot, coming out with a lot of updates. And I'm actually going to be releasing my book. This may seem completely off topic, but 4 years ago, I was in an accident where I was medically dead. And I actually went into a coma for 18 days after that. And I saw a lot of things and recognized a lot of truth about the spiritual realm. And so my book for 18 Days in Heaven is actually coming out soon. So the pre-order link is out. They can check that out as well.
All right. Well, we're going to talk to you about give me some video about what happened there at this Christian campus that kicked you out because praying for people is, after Turning Point's, experience, I think we have very low tolerance in Texas for the intolerance for conservatives and Christians. Hard to believe we're out of time already, but listen, don't forget that cool medical kit. Go to lancewallnau.com/medical so that as you travel or as you go into the holidays, as we're going to come into Thanksgiving, you don't have to end up going to some long line waiting to get, a diagnosis that you could already have with the solution at home. Use code Lance to save 10%. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it